Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to the next Alumni Career Webinar. So you're applying to grad school part 2, Crafting a Successful Application with Kevin Kiley. This builds off of the webinar that Kevin hosted for us back in December 2019 on how to prepare for applying to graduate school. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar offered exclusively for the Holy Cross community. We are also joined today by Dr. Tony Cashman, the Director of the Office of Distinguished Fellowships and Graduate Studies at Holy Cross, and we'll hear from Tony in a few minutes, and then he'll join us for the Q&A. We'll be together for an hour today. After Kevin's formal presentation, Kevin and Tony will take questions from you for as long as time allows. And I encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation by checking out the Q&A function located on the control panel. If you have any questions about the presentation itself or about connection, you can contact me directly via chat. This presentation is recorded and will be made available to all participants in a few days once it's up on the college YouTube channel. Before we begin today's presentation, as promised, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Tony Cashman to talk about his work serving the Holy Cross community. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me here. It's always nice to get my message out there. So at Holy Cross, I have two main responsibilities. The first is fellowships, and most of those opportunities are post-baccalaureate. Some are related to, directly related to certain programs at graduate schools, but many of them are sort of more general than that. And my second function is as our general graduate school advisor. So I'm probably a good place to start your journey if you want to be pointed in a certain direction. And I'm delighted to work with alumni. So I'm not just for our current students. It would be really good to hear from whatever alumni want to contact me. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know that since you've worked with so many people over the years, it'll be great to have your perspective in the Q&A to bring those stories from past Holy Cross students and alumni and their journeys to graduate school. So thank you very much for being here. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Kevin. With Grad School Roadmap, Kevin coaches individuals on the graduate school admissions process, everything from preliminary research and preparing applications to interviews and choosing among offers. Kevin's background includes 5+ years as an MBA admissions director at Washington University in St. Louis and 5+ years in corporate talent development. He has successfully coached graduate and undergraduate students, rising leaders, mid-career professionals, career switchers, and medical doctors. He has an MBA from Wash U's Olin Business School, a professional certified coach through the International Coach Federation. He is also a career coach and founded his own company, Career Roadmap, that he and his wife live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. With that, I am happy to hand things over to Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you, Maura, and thank you all very much for joining us here today. It's a true pleasure to be here once again. It was mentioned earlier, that we were here in doing a webinar for Holy Cross in December of 2019. And as memory serves, in December 2019, right about the time of this webinar, there was about 20 inches of snow on the ground in the Worcester area. Who would have thought that we'd be now in late August 2020 where we are right now? Thinking about challenges that we do have. So I guess the takeaway there is that there's probably always going to be challenges of one form or fashion. But today we're going to try to make the grad school admissions process a little less challenging by talking about how to craft a successful application. So thank you all again for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with both Maura and with Tony here today. So you've heard a little bit about me and my background, and Tony as well. First thing I want to do is get to know some of you and see where you all are. First thing is what area of grad school are you thinking about right now? Which of these are you most likely to pursue? We've got the survey cranking right now, and if you would kind of fill in right there. By the way, it's totally okay if you're not sure at this point, the final answer. But go ahead and do the one that you're thinking you're most likely to pursue at this time in what you're doing. We'll let it go for another few minutes here, or a few seconds here, and then see what we got going here. I appreciate the responses here. Looks like we're just about there. So thank you, Maura. So we've got a little over half, 57% are thinking about a master's in some other area other than law school, medical school, or business school. About 30% are thinking about a business master's degree, an MBA or specialized, and we've got 14% thinking a doctorate of some kind. So that is awesome. Nobody's thinking about law school, nobody's thinking about medical school, and everyone is, well, if someone's unsure at this point, they're not saying so. So that's fine, that's cool. Okay, so a master's in other areas, the majority, followed by a business master's and then a doctorate. So thank you, that is helpful. Second question related to this, and again, thank you for your participation here. What would be your main reason for going to grad school? Well, you know, there are a lot of different reasons why someone could go to grad school, and there are no right or wrong reasons for it. But these are some of the more common ones. You know, to accelerate growth, to qualify yourself for a new career path, to explore different career possibilities, maybe something else, or once again, I'm not sure at this point. Again, that's okay at this point, especially. But thank you for the responses, which are coming in right now, fast and furious. We'll see what we got going here, and this is very helpful. I appreciate it. It's always good to know who's in our audience, and so if I can do any tailoring of the presentation, I can do that. Looks like we're about. Oh, there's one more. Okay. Qualify for a new career path is the majority, almost 50% there. Another third are saying to accelerate in a current area, and 20% to explore different career possibilities. No one says for my own personal learning and edification. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, grad school, after all, is a major investment, and it's totally understandable that if you're going to kind of go down that road, that there would be sort of an outcome such as one that would be related to careers. But we're talking, I mean, I'm sure that that's part of everyone's reason why they would go to grad school. But as far as the main reason, we're talking about a lot of people who are thinking about switching careers. That's interesting. Grad school can be a way to, if you will, sort of hit the career reset button or to pivot to something new. I would also tell you, both as a former admissions director on the graduate side and as a career coach, that it's often not the only way to go about doing it. In other words, it's part of a process for changing careers, but it may not be, just think of it as part of the recipe for changing careers. That aside, I would want to speak with everyone individually about, you know, kind of where you are right now and where you want to go, and then how a graduate degree might help bridge that gap in between the two. But it can definitely be part of the recipe for success. So thank you. That's good to know as far as where everyone is right now. So, okay, so I've gotten to know myself a little bit. This is a little bit more background there. Again, I've been in higher ed for a little over 12 years, and you know, 20 years of leadership experience. And yeah, as was mentioned earlier, I have my own career coaching consultancy called Career Roadmap, and I also do grad school admissions coaching through an outfit called Grad School Roadmap, which is a small boutique admissions consultancy. We do one-on-one admissions coaching, and we also do speaking engagements such as this. We speak to alumni organizations, we speak to career centers on campuses, we speak to other affinity groups and whatnot. And relative to our career coaching, the success rate is right there for you with that much scholarship funding right there. If you're interested in that at all, my email will be at the end of the presentation, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me. But that's a little bit about me, and we're not here to talk about me and my work. We're here to talk about how we can help you get into grad school. So let's jump into this here. So last December, this was our agenda. We talked about the research process and helping decide where you can apply, 7 ways to get positively noticed, and then 7 ways to get not so positively noticed, which we called the 7 deadly sins for applicants. And then finally, application tips, tips regarding financial aid, scholarships, and that kind of thing. If you were here and with us in December, awesome. If not, no problem. It is available on YouTube. The link is there on your screen right now. I believe Maura is going to make that available in the chat as well. And in addition, for anyone who would want a copy of these slides after the presentation, like I said, my email will be there at the end, and just send me an email and I'll be happy to forward you a copy of the slides. And but I'm sure it's readily findable on YouTube as well, in addition to the link in the chat. So that was December. So here we are in late August 2020. This is what we're going to talk about today: crafting a successful application. So we're going to talk about the typical components of grad school applications. And we're going to talk about how admissions committees use those components to actually make an evaluation on your candidacy. We'll talk about ways you can ace the admissions interview and things that you can be doing now to maximize your chances. Even if grad school is perhaps a year or several years away, there are definitely things you can be doing now to help your chances. And then we'll have the Q&A. As mentioned, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions at any time. I'm going to go through the presentation straight through, and then we'll save time at the end for the Q&A. Please, as questions come up, though, enter those into that. We had some questions submitted beforehand. We'll do our best effort to get to those too. And any questions that we don't have time to, I'll make myself available to answer those as well. So Q&A is the fun part at the end. So make sure you're submitting those questions for myself, and I'm sure Tony will have some good contributions there as well too. So when we're talking about components of a grad school application, something that's very important to note is that today we're talking about a very high level overview. In a 45-minute presentation, it would be literally impossible for me to go over all the nuances of every graduate program and every discipline in the world, really, because we're not just talking about the US, we're talking everywhere. So there are definitely some high level things that generally hold true across nearly all graduate programs and all disciplines. And that's the general basis of our conversation here today. But every program is unique. Every program is going to have its own nuances, idiosyncrasies, whatever you want to call them. And as part of your process, absolutely make sure that you are doing your research and you have a good eye and a good knowledge set around what each program's application requirements are, because you don't want to blow it. You want to do all that work and then you realize that you didn't realize that, oh, something else was required, or I had to do this or anything like that. Classic example on this is financial aid. So some graduate programs, it'll be the case that they will make their evaluation on your candidacy relative to scholarships and financial aid based on your existing application itself. In other words, all you have to do is submit the regular application. That's all you have to do, and you're automatically considered for fellowships, scholarships, grant, yada, yada, all the different free money, all the fun stuff. Then some are going to probably have it, well, they will have it, where you have your admissions application and then you have your scholarship application, two separate things, and you have to hit both. And by hit, I mean the deadlines. There are deadlines usually affiliated with these. Sometimes it's the same deadline, the application deadline and the scholarship deadline. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's different. Other times they could have a different situation where if you apply and then if you're admitted, then you have to submit a scholarship application. And there are other variations there as well. The point is you don't want to have it happen to you. And I've seen this happen where, let's say that, on the deadline day, it's due at midnight and you hit submit at, 11:15. You think, okay, I beat it by 45 minutes. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. And then a little blip comes up, a thing, in the application system says, that's great. And by the way, did you also submit your scholarship application? And you haven't touched it yet. Don't let that happen to you. Know what the requirements are for each program and make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of time. Okay, components of most graduate school applications. So there's 6 of these. First, the undergraduate transcripts. We're going to talk a little bit more detail about what they're going to look at on those transcripts a little later in the presentation. But the quality of institution is going to come into play. Obviously, Holy Cross is an outstanding institution, and so that's going to do really well for you in the graduate admissions process. They'll look at the GPA too, but there are other things that they will definitely look at. It's not just all about that GPA number. I said undergraduate transcripts here, but oh, by the way, if you actually if this might by chance might be your 2nd or 3rd or whatever graduate degree, they're going to want to see your graduate transcripts as well. So basically any college, any undergraduate or graduate work that you've already done, they're going to want to see your transcripts. Standardized tests, maybe, because, okay, so it's the GMAT, the GRE, the LSAT, the MCAT. These are, have been sort of part of the lexicon of graduate admissions for a long time. There's a lot of conversation out there right now for a lot of different reasons about what the future of these exams are going to be. And especially relative to our situation right now with COVID-19, a lot of programs are relaxing these requirements and even in some cases waiving them altogether. And so it is highly likely that to get in admission to a competitive graduate program that you will have to complete and do reasonably well on one of those standardized tests, but maybe not. So again, as part of your research, make sure you know specifically which test is going to be the one that you're going to pursue, and also the degree to which it truly is required. So third is a resume or CV. Any program is going to want to know about your overall activities since you finished undergraduate, and if you actually are in undergraduate right now and are going to transition directly into graduate school, they're going to want to know about your activity away from the academic setting. So extracurriculars, co-curriculars, on-campus jobs, off-campus jobs, co-ops, international opportunity, all these different things you'd see on the resume or the CV. Recommendations. Almost every graduate program is going to require these. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3. Again, it just depends on the overall program. Who submits these recommendations on your behalf? Again, program specific. Sometimes it's going to be an academic recommendation. Sometimes it might be professional. Some programs might require 1 of each. Rarely in graduate programs are you going to see someone or a program that's going to look for a personal reference. I'm sure there are some out there, but overall it's either going to be an academic recommendation or a professional one. So those are the recommendations. Essays, there might be 1. There might be several. Big trend on essays is that they're getting shorter, which don't automatically think that that's good news, because as for those of you who have done any amount of writing, as I'm sure everyone on this webinar today knows, it actually can be more challenging to write short than to write long. And you've got all these things you want to communicate to the admissions committee, but you only have 250 words to do it. That's challenging. And so it's just one of those things to make sure that your essays are ready to go. And again, it's one of the other reasons why it's always good to have a calendar, have a schedule, and start early. Don't make sure that you're planning out all these different things. Finally, interviews. And we're going to get much more into detail on this later in the webinar about the admissions interview and how that would come usually after you submit your application, and how truly that could actually make or break your candidacy. So another poll question to ask here, and that is this. I'm talking about deadlines and missing deadlines. So for most programs that have actual deadlines, so it's something to note there. Most programs are going to have, here's the date of it, here's the deadline. Some will have rolling admissions, which you may remember from previous graduate work or even undergraduate perhaps, that it's basically as soon as your application is ready, get it in. There are no hard deadlines. But for those programs that do have deadlines, to be considered usually as having hit that deadline, that means everything is submitted by that deadline. What do you think causes the most frequently causes deadlines to get missed? And I'm saying this as a former admissions director, I've seen it a lot. Which of these 6 things? And we'll let the answers crank in here, and I'll give it just a few more minutes. We've had some things roll in here. A lot of people are saying recommendations. I'll give it just another few seconds here. Appreciate your participation here. We've got another few. We'll give those last few people a chance to vote. All right, why don't we go ahead and wrap it up. So 60% say recommendations, and undergraduate transcript, standardized test, essays right there. So recommendations for sure, easily is the thing that will call, because you're counting on somebody else, and someone else has to know what those deadlines are, and they have to prepare those documents, and they have to know how to submit them, and all of a sudden they get distracted because they have a priority in their life they have to attend to. The recommendations will slow down an application more often than anything else. I appreciate that 20% said undergraduate transcripts. That would definitely be the second thing that would slow them down, because again, to a certain extent, you're counting on other people. A lot of programs, universities right now have automated this process. So if you need to get a copy of your undergraduate, I know that Holy Cross has done that. You can just go to a website, click a bunch of things. You have to pay a very small fee, usually per transcript, and boom, there it's taken care of. It's very quick. It's very transactional. But there are certain institutions, depending on how old your transcripts are, or what school within the university they're coming out of, or just depending on the school overall, where it's still a manual process that still someone has to actually go and do that stuff. And especially now in an era of COVID-19, where there are a lot of people working remotely, a lot of registrars' offices are like a lot of other workplaces right now where people are not physically in offices. So once again, another reason why in this process, give yourself plenty of time. time. And whether it comes to recommendations, whether it comes to transcripts, or any of these other things, that's definitely something to be thinking about. Okay, thank you for that participation. So those are the 6 components of that are typical to graduate school applications. So let's talk a little bit now about how admissions committees actually use those components as part of your formal evaluation. So what admissions committees are looking for, that's what we're really talking about here. So most are going to take a very broad, holistic approach to this thing. They do look at everything for the most part. It's not, for the most part, it's not all about this one singular thing, or these 2 things over here. They're going to look at everything in totality. But a lot of times programs now are getting actually overall better about communicating to applicants what exactly it is that they're looking for in a successful applicant. And they will tell you that on their website. They'll tell you that as part of admissions information sessions, as part of any kind of outreach things that they do, whether it's in person or virtual. And so a lot of these programs will tell you, this is exactly what we're looking for. And this is what really matters in our admissions committee when we meet and make decisions on candidates. But that having been said, overall, 4 main sort of overall things that pretty much every program is going to be looking for. So first and foremost, it's an academic program. They need to know that you are academically qualified for that institution and for that program. And what do they have to go on for that? They have, here it is, your academic transcripts, both anything from your undergraduate transcripts and any graduate work that you've done, and your standardized test results. Usually one, but preferably both of those need to be pretty good for you to gain admission to a competitive program. When it comes to those transcripts, again, the overall GPA does matter. They will look at that, but at the same time, it could be relative to the actual program that you're thinking about entering into. So we had a lot of people who are looking at master's degrees in a lot of different areas. If you're looking at a master's degree, let's say in engineering, I'm just picking that at random, you're darn right that the admissions committee is going to, sure, look at your GPA, but they're also going to look at any quantitative-based classes, any science classes, obviously any engineering courses because those are going to be more important in that sort of basis and that kind of decision. If you're looking to go get an MBA or a master's degree in business, yeah, they're going to be looking a little more closely at your business-related coursework. And so those things, it's not just about that final GPA. It's about specifically, I mean, if it were just about the GPA, there probably would be no need for them to actually have the transcript. They would just need to know some sort of official report, what was your GPA? But they actually want to look class by class how you did that. And by the way, there are a lot of people out there who there are trends that show on their transcript. And what I mean by that is some people, when they start their undergraduate experience, are a little distracted and don't do so well right out of the gate when it comes to transitioning from high school to college. And so the other thing that admissions committees will look for is trends. And that is that, okay, maybe you didn't start out so hot, an undergraduate in your first semester or your first year, but then your GPA kind of, started going up because, you kind of figured things out and got your priorities straight and that sort of thing. So it's okay if you started slow out of the gate, but again, the admissions committee will notice those kinds of things. How well do you know the program? How much do you truly want to be there? In the undergraduate world, this is called demonstrated interest. This is the kind of thing where they want to know, programs want to know that you truly want to go there and that you want to be part of that community and you want to study in that environment. And how do you know that? How does that come across? It comes through your essays, the interviews, and also a lot of other interactions that you might have. Generally speaking, as part of your process, you don't want your very first touch point with the program or with the university to be your application. You want to have had some contact with that admissions office, with that program, with that school before your application comes in. It's almost like you're starting to sort of establish a relationship there. And so that when your application does come in, maybe the admissions director doesn't know you on a first name basis, but they kind of remember who you are. Oh yeah, he or she was at this event, or we traded emails, or we had a phone call, or whatever it was. And so, how much do they really want to be there? That is important. Career goals. Are you realistic and are you focused? We talked a little bit earlier about your main reasons for wanting to come to graduate school and what it was. We talked about this in our December webinar about the whole reason. What's your why? Why are you doing this? What is your reasoning for wanting to go to grad school? And if you're pretty clear on that, it comes through, and it seems this shows alignment on your resume, in your essays, in your recommendations, and it comes across in your interview as well. So making sure that it's like, okay, here's a candidate who has been doing X, Y, and Z, and she says that she wants to be doing A, B, and C, and she's saying that if with our graduate degree, she can bridge that gap, and it makes sense. If that all makes sense, it's obvious, it's clear, it's like, yes, this works. That makes you come across as career focused, and it makes you come across as ready, and it shows that you've done your research and you're ready for this sort of thing. If that sort of overall story about your career does not make sense, that doesn't look good to the admissions committee. So again, they want to know if you're focused and your career goals are realistic, especially relative to their graduate program. And then finally, are you a fit for their culture? Are you the kind of person that would fit in well there? Usually that means, are you likable and a good person to be around? Most of these graduate programs are smaller, kind of closed communities. Big difference between undergraduate and graduate is that the graduate community at most programs is considerably smaller than the undergraduate side of things. And every individual, their contributions matter more. And so if you've got someone who clearly is not a good fit for a certain school or program, that's going to be more conspicuous than it would be in the undergraduate environment. So they're going to want to know, okay, how well does this person fit in? And that's not just for their interest. My gosh, it's for your interest too. I mean, would you really want to go to a place where you wanted to go there because it was a great school or a great brand, or they got a great alumni network or whatever, but you didn't truly feel like you fit in there? Is that really where you would want to go? So that's, fit is a two-way street for sure. A couple other things just to mention, by the way, for MBA programs, we had a lot of people who mentioned an interest in graduate business programs. They want to know about your potential as a business leader. That's going to come through on your past experience, again, on your resume or CV, essays, recommendations, and the interview. For many other programs, they're going to know about research interests in teaching. And that, again, that's something that would show on your resume or your CV, and see in your essays or your interviews as well. This in particular, we had some individuals who are interested in doctoral programs. This can be a big deal for doctoral programs that have a research component. So for example, if you're a PhD where you're going to be doing, doctoral level thesis research, publications, this sort of thing, that's going to be, generally speaking, a big deal. But again, it's program specific. There are PhD programs out there where if you don't have any research experience, for example, you can still gain admission there. You just need to have sort of that eye and desire to want to get involved with that. And then there are other PhD programs where if you don't have research experience when you apply, you're pretty much not going to, you have very little chance. So again, program to program, it's got to be specific. So, and then finally, extracurriculars such as, volunteer work, job shadowing, internships, externships, all these different kinds of things. Most programs like to see that, and some of them actually have that as part of the requirement. If you're interested, for example, in getting a graduate degree in physical therapy, you have to have a certain amount of contact hours in a physical therapy clinic, because again, these programs want to see that you've actually spent the time, putting in the time, and that you are going to be, if they're going to give you a seat in that class, they want you to not only start the program, but finish the program. And so these different sorts of opportunities to sort of build your resume around, again, internships, job shadowing, et cetera. Most programs are going to want to see that as well. So as part of sort of a holistic approach. Okay, so awesome. So let me glance at the time here. Okay, so we've been through the components of an application, the typical components, and then how admissions committees go through those. Now let's talk about how to ace the admissions interview. Generally speaking, this is going to come after you've submitted your application. In some cases, it may come before, but overall, usually you've submitted your application. And so I'm going to break down what I'm going to convey to you in three parts, sort of before, during, and after the admissions interview. So before, the big thing is prepare. Make sure that you know as much as possible about that interview going into it. Everything from the format to who's going to be interviewing you. Are there any other components of the interview? By interview, sometimes there are other things that they're going to want you to do, like a case study or some sort of experiment. They're going to want to sort of see you in action, sort of thing. And you definitely, and you have nothing to fear by those things, but at the same time, you don't want to be surprised by the fact that you're going to have to go through that. So make sure that you are fully aware of what it's going to be before you get in there. Sometimes most admissions offices are pretty forthright about telling you what it's going to be. Some of the times they'll have it right there on their website. Other times they might kind of play things close vest. And so the biggest thing to do is to make sure that you're just prepared to think on your feet and ready to go. Obviously, research the program, make sure you know them backward, forward, make sure you reread your application, your essays, your resume, and prepare your questions for them. You definitely want to make sure that you have questions prepared for them, and make sure that you have good questions prepared for them. And by good, I mean ask questions that, first of all, that really matter to you. You're not just asking questions to ask questions, but secondly, ask questions the answer to which cannot be easily found on their website or in other areas, or things that they have gone out of their way to sort of answer common questions. Make sure that you're asking good, specific questions that really do matter to you. Make sure that your attire is ready to go. Always better to overdress than underdress. If by video or by phone, which is pretty much the rule these days, it's just like any other professional, if it's a Zoom meeting or any other Microsoft Teams or whatever you do, all the usual things that would go into, a really important meeting that you would have with a really valuable client or with your, your big boss or anything like that. Make sure that everything is good and ready to go, that your technology is all set, and that you're representing yourself in the best possible way. There's no one single right way to be successful in the interview. Just similarly, there's no one right way that a program can conduct the interview. Pretty much anything is fair game. You never know what they're going to do. I once did an admissions interview with someone where long story short, we ended up I gave that person a campus tour while we did the admissions interview, because he said he'd never seen our campus before and it was such a beautiful day. Just randomly, I said, you know what, why don't we take a walk? And I did the admissions interview as we took a walk around campus. He did great. We admitted him. Anyway, preparation is critical. But again, as I mentioned earlier, very important to think on your feet. You never know what's really going to come up. Speaking of these sorts of things, this is, I believe, our final poll for the day. Thank you, Maura, for launching that poll. When we're talking about the evaluation of your candidacy in the context of the admissions interview, this is a true or false question. Your evaluation begins when the interview asks you that first question. And this is true regardless if it's in person, video, or a phone interview. Is this true or false? In other words, your evaluation is started and that starts when you have to get that first question. You say, okay, now I'm being evaluated. And okay, so we've got it's coming in here, about 3/4 have answered false. Give it just another few minutes here. It's not meant to be a trick question, but this is an important one. All right, why don't we cut it off there, Maura? Thank you very much. So it's basically 3/4 are saying false, and the other quarter is saying true. Your evaluation begins basically once you're on site or you're on that call. It is before they ask that first question. Everything that, every time, if you're actually doing an in-person interview, the moment you're on site, on campus, at the coffee shop, wherever you're doing that interview, you are being evaluated from that moment on. Yes, it continues when they ask that first question, but if you're there, if you're with them or you're on the call, you are being evaluated. I mean, they're drawing conclusions about you before they ask that first question. So you got to be ready from the moment you're on site. And if on site means you're on a video call or on the phone, you got to be ready from right there. If you're on site, make sure you duck into a restroom, give yourself a look, make sure everything's good. That's interviewing 101 stuff. But also don't be empty-handed. Always have something, a portfolio, a file folder or something like that. Get your phone turned off. Even if it's on vibrate, it can be a distraction. And if the big sports news breaks in the middle of your interview and all your buddies are blowing up your phone because so-and-so just got traded or whatever, all of a sudden that's going to create an embarrassing moment right in the middle of that interview. Turn that thing off and be there 5 minutes early. And there again, in the call or on site, you don't go earlier than that, because if you're there earlier, the person can feel obligated to start the interview early, or they have to entertain you or anything like that. So you want to be early. It's good to be early, but don't be too early. 5 minutes is usually real good. As far as that strong first impression, again, a lot of this parallels job interviews. I'm sure everyone on this call has been in on job interviews before. Mirror what you would do there. First and last name, that's a huge one among admissions officers. We're not, 13-year-old kids anymore. You're Mackenzie Johnson, you're Steve, Steve Jones or whatever it is. You first and last name. You're not just Steve. You're not just Mackenzie. It's first and last name. Professionalism. Strong, confident handshake. Don't try to break anyone's hand. smile, eye contact, all those things that, you probably learned from the Career Center at Holy Cross. I mean, these are the things that need to come into a graduate admissions interview as well. Be grateful for being there. They're extended an opportunity for you to have this interview. Be grateful about that. Be prepared for some preliminary small talk. This is a big one. So if you come into the video interview and they say, hey, thank you very much for being with me today. How's your day going so far? And you say, fine. Okay, you need to have something more. Have something more. Talk. The weather is an easy one. Go to where. Go online and look at the weather where they are and say, hey, you had some storms come through last night. Hope everything's okay. Or safe current events. Don't get political or anything weird like that. But just have something to say. Like, oh, I'm having a great day. You want to be positive. You want to be upbeat. Don't tell them the bad news or and you want upbeat, positive. You want to be prepared for that small talk because again, you are being evaluated right there. Make sure that they have a chance to actually conduct the interview and run the interview. It's their room. You have some things that you want to convey for sure, but make sure that you are doing your parts to answer the questions and let them conduct the interview, not the other way around. Be careful about the length of your responses. Usually 30 seconds to 2 minutes is plenty. You want to make it conversational. So your goal is to not have that interview feel like he or she is having to extract information out of you. You want to make sure it's kind of like a give and take sort of thing. Let some personality come through to an extent. Don't let your guard down. It is an interviewing technique. I've seen it happen where the admissions committee member will basically appear to let their guard down and kind of get buddy-buddy with you just to see how you respond and see if you drop your professionalism. It's been done. So just be careful. I mean, be personable, but just be careful. This is a professional interview. And again, you have to be careful. You have to be prepared to be willing to promote your own accomplishments. It's just like a job interview. That can be tough for many of us to do because we're not braggadocious people. But just remember, if you don't, what if your competition does? Never forget, you are in a competitive process with other admissions, with other applicants. And if they promote their accomplishments and you don't, when it comes decision time, that could affect things. Again, we talked earlier about having questions prepared, so I won't belabor that any further. And by the way, you don't have to wait to the end of the interview. If something comes up in the natural course of the conversation, again, your goal is to make it conversational. It's okay to sort of drop in a question there and be mindful of your time. If they ask, do you have any questions left? And it's been billed as a 45-minute interview and your sense is we're getting close on time, this is not the time to ask 20 questions. If you are admitted, you'll have your chance to ask questions later on down the road. So ask good questions, but always be careful about the overall time. When you wrap up, it's sort of the opposite thing. Thank them again. Good, strong handshake, eye contact, smile, let them know you appreciated their time. And remember that just because you're sort of seen and be done with the questions, your evaluation keeps going. When it comes to Zoom and video interviews, make sure that your Zoom is completely off and your webcam is off and everything is done before you give that big sigh of relief or say anything that you might regret or anything like that. Make sure you are done and off that call before you do something that you're going to shoot yourself in your foot after you just had an otherwise outstanding interview. I advocate for doing a brain dump after any interview just to sort of unload everything that you just heard, that you learned and everything. It could come in valuable when you go to write your thank you notes or any follow-up or just, for general awareness and that kind of thing. You'll probably end up having several admissions interviews. And so it'd also be helpful to kind of keep the information straight about who you heard or what you heard from whom. So thank you notes are really good. Notes are okay, but honestly, especially, a lot of people working remotely these days, an email works just fine. And honestly, even if we weren't in a pandemic right now, admissions officers are infamous for their travel schedules. And so they may not be in the office very much, especially in the fall. So email is usually the way to go. It doesn't have to be anything long or flowery. Just, briefly communicate that you appreciate their time, you appreciate what you did for them, and wrap it up, tell them that you're looking forward to, their decision. So, okay, so we're getting a little close on time here, speaking of time. So I'm going to go ahead and fly through this last section that is important, but I'm going to kind of do the fast forward version of it. I hope you're submitting those Q&As, the questions in the Q&A is what I meant to say, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes here. But things that you can be doing now to maximize your chances. So get that standardized test knocked out. That's by itself it's not the only thing that admissions committees are going to use to make their decision, but often it's a major thing. And most programs will not advertise, a low score, like, okay, if you're beneath this, you're not going to get in. But generally speaking, there is sort of a threshold that it's kind of gray sometimes, but if you are below that, you're probably have very little chance of getting in. And so you get that thing taken care of, get it out of the way. And that way you kind of know, once you are finished with that, you have a better sense of kind of what schools you might be a good candidate for, what might be a bit of a reach, what would be probably a pretty good school for you to get into, all these different things. So the sooner you can get that out of the way, the better. And by the way, for all the tests, you can take them multiple times, and the vast majority of programs will only take your best result. And so, you don't, other than the study time and the test fee, you don't have much to lose. I mean, get it knocked out. I clumped all these together, these next things. So obviously excelling at your current role, making sure that you're doing a great job there. That's important for a lot of different reasons, but making sure that you are continuing to build up your track record of success in your current role, but also building your resume in other areas, which is number 3 here. Making sure that you're doing things like volunteer work, getting more leadership experience, those sorts of things. You're building your resume and your career path. And so that ties into number 4, and that is you're making sure that you have a good sense for what those career plans are. And what I mean by, is researching that and working to define and refine is not just, doing a couple, Google searches on a Saturday morning. One of the big things I would definitely encourage you to do, if you haven't already, especially for those of you who have said you're talking about making a career switch with this graduate degree, I would ask you, have you had informational interviews with anyone who is in roles such as those that you are going to be targeting after your graduate degree? In other words, you've actually talked to people who have the kind of jobs that you want to have, that you aspire to have after you finish your graduate degree. That's a wise investment of your time for a lot of reasons. One of them being you can actually use that information in your application essays, in your interviews, and hopefully it helps you feel as though in your investment in graduate school that you're making an even stronger investment, because you've researched this and you know that this is an appropriate and a good next step for you career-wise. Might as well get going on those recommendations as in cultivating those recommenders now, especially those who have been away from the academic setting for a while. If it's the case that the kind of program that you're going to pursue on the graduate level is going to require academic recommendations, if you haven't been in touch with that, lovely professor that, you took, 4 or 5 years ago, might not be a bad time to get in touch with that individual and just sort of remind him or her who you are and what's going on and catch them up and that sort of thing, and start to build that relationship now. Again, even if you're, grad school is a couple years away, always better to, to make sure that you're in touch with those people now. So that, and overall nurturing your network, because that will come in handy once you start graduate school as well. We talked about this a lot in December, so I'm not going to go into many details, but doing your program research and identifying where you plan to apply, what programs are best aligned with you, your career goals, your overall, your family, everything that goes into this decision. Make sure that you are doing your research. Even in a pandemic, programs are having a lot of virtual events now as opposed to in-person ones. You can go to any program website and find out, when they're going to be having that. You can learn more about the program that way. Again, you don't want your first touch point with a program, ideally, to be the application. You want to have some interaction with that program in some form or fashion before you actually apply. So go looking for those. Get on their mailing lists. Okay, yeah, if you get on their mailing list, I can tell you, you're going to get a ton of emails from every one of those programs. But it's a great way to stay plugged in, and it's a great way to stay current on what's going on in those programs. And related to that is what's there in number 9, and that is plug in with them on social media, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Follow them on all those different things, and you will start to naturally sort of plug into what's going on there, what they consider to be a big deal, what the features of that program are, and so that you are more plugged in. And you never know when they might have something there that could come in very handy. But the final note is there's also, at the same time, mind your own social media, because once again, as a former admissions director, I can tell you that as part of the vetting process for you, don't be surprised at all if programs go looking for you, not just on social media, but online. They will Google you, they'll look for you on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And if you have something on there that even might could be a liability, I'd suggest you get it off there. And, obviously, just you want to be careful about that kind of thing, because you just don't want to have anything there that could inadvertently send the wrong signal. And the next thing you know, you're denied. They'll never tell you why they denied you, but if they go and they see that post from 3 years ago that was fairly incendiary, and it's like, hey, this just doesn't appear to be a good fit with our culture, then you're denied. So those are 9 things you can be doing now. Do you have to do all of them right this instant? No, but these are things that you can, no matter, even if it's a few years off, a couple years off, whatever, these are things you could be definitely doing now when it comes to preparing for graduate school. So we've been through the components. We've been through how admissions committees use those components. We've been through the admissions interview. And we've been through things we can do now, which brings us to the Q&A. So I'm going to turn things over to Maura for that. Here's my contact information. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email, whatever you'd like to do. If you're interested in coaching, I do a free 30-minute call for anyone interested to talk about you and your situation and how I can help. Send me an email, let me know. Thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed it. Looking forward to this Q&A. Maura?
Thank you very, very much, Kevin. As I expected, you gave us tons and tons of advice. So I hope that everyone's minds are processing everything. And I've seen lots of good questions come through the Q&A. So thank you very much. I am going to switch us over to gallery view and invite Tony on back to the call with us too. Wonderful. So just to get started, someone had a question during the presentation, and you touched upon this a little bit about recommendations and kind of getting back in touch. You had mentioned someone who might be 4 to 5 years out, and the question came in about, what if you're 15 years out? What if it's a longer stretch? Or this wasn't their question, but I know that a faculty member who I was very close with no longer works at the college. How would you advise someone who might be in that kind of a situation where they're far enough out that their close faculty might not work there, or they worry they might not remember who they are?
Yeah, it's a tough, there's a few options on that. One is that you can, even if the person's retired, the question, can you track them down? Hey, social media is great for that. LinkedIn is great on that. Just because they're retired or they're emeritus doesn't mean that they still couldn't provide, because the context of that academic, if you will, recommendation is that I have observed this person in an academic setting, and I can warrant their, effectiveness and their ability to potentially be a strong graduate student. So their status is less. Now, yeah, it's like reaching out to anybody else you haven't been in touch with for 15 years. You're friendly, I hope you remember me. And honestly, if you had a good relationship with them 15 years ago, I don't know of any reason why they wouldn't be pleased to hear from you. I mean, most teachers that I know love hearing from former students, especially if they're really good ones. And if they're in a position to help you, I mean, that's a good thing. So anyway, hey, give it a shot, see if you can reach out to them. That's one thing. If they're not there anymore, you're having trouble tracking them down, then you might have to go to your plan B, someone else at the institution. But the other one that you can do, if it's been 15 years since you've been in an academic setting, it would be understandable for the admissions committee to note that and think about, well, is this person ready to be a student again? And so something that you could do as part of building your case for admissions is potentially find some sort of academic challenge now. Go take a course, whether an undergraduate course, go to a community college. If you can get in, you can do a graduate level course someplace that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Go there and kind of get back into student mode and impress the heck out of your teacher there and have that person be one of your recommenders. Now you've got someone who's recently observed you. So there's 3 options for you.
Yeah, if I could add one thing to that, or 2 things. Yeah. So I still teach at the Harvard Extension School, and I definitely have students who are doing exactly what Kevin just said, which is trying to get back into an academic mode and get some credentials behind them. I would also say, if you're contacting a professor from the way back, and I've had this happen to me, as a professor, it's really good if you could send them a sample of your writing. I always saved all my papers, and most of us have them now on our computers. It would be really good to remind them how you think. Even if you don't really remember the student very well, if you can evaluate their writing or something they did for your course, then that's helpful. I can usually say something positive about them.
That's fantastic. Oh, good advice there. Thank you both very much. Here's another question that came in. What advice do you have to build relationships with an admissions representative? You mentioned that the first touch point shouldn't be that application. So what tips can you give? Because I know sometimes people are worried that admissions representatives are very busy and they're talking to lots of people.
Sure. Well, I would say encourage, yeah, so admissions committee members get a lot of outreach from a lot of people, and especially from about late July to about mid-February or so. They're pretty busy people because there's a lot of bees on that honey, if you will. And so it's very important, I would say, first of all, that yes, you're seeking to create a relationship, if you will, to build a working relationship, but to be respectful of their time and just be aware of the fact that, that you're one of potentially hundreds or thousands of people who are trying to get in front of them. And so there's a way you can communicate without over communicating. So how do you do that? Well, again, sort of first thing is meet them where they are. So in other words, if there are these admissions events that they have, again, whether it's in person or virtual, and by the way, for those of you, maybe it's been a long time for some people, but you remember those admissions fairs that you attended when you're in high school? They have those for graduate school for almost all programs. Now, again, now these days it's a lot of virtual stuff, but usually those are staffed by people who are on the admissions committees. And you get a chance to actually meet them, if you will, face to face. If it's virtual, okay, fine. But again, and on top of that, it's asking questions, but asking good questions. I mean, I would encourage you not to think of yourself as, bothering them or as an inconvenience. That's their job. Their job is to represent the program, represent the university. And if an applicant or prospective student has questions, that's their job. At the same time, you're not going to create a favorable impression. Again, if you're just asking questions, ask questions, or asking things that they have gone out of their way to communicate in other media, i.e. their website. And so it's appropriate communication at the right time and asking good questions. Those are the biggest ways that I would suggest you sort of build those relationships, but also kind of know when to say when. It changes quite a bit, by the way, once you would actually be admitted to the program, because you go from a pool of, who knows, several thousand or whatever, to all of a sudden a much smaller subset. And now they've said that we want you as part of our community. Again, careful not to over communicate, but the dynamic definitely changes at that point.
Yeah, if I could add something about PhD programs in the academic disciplines, perhaps you're interested in getting a PhD in English or history, something like that, sciences as well. In most instances, you'll be applying to departments rather than admissions committees. Sometimes the departments will form an admission committee, but usually what most students want to do in most disciplines is make prior contact with potential advisors, because that's really your most important relationship, will be one-on-one. Especially in UK universities, it's all one-on-one pretty much. But even in an American program where you will be studying with a number of professors, there will be that number one advisor. And most disciplines want you to make that prior contact. The exceptions would be econ, math, physics, engineering. You see a sort of theme there, right? They usually don't encourage prior contact or discourage it actively. But pretty much everyone else, including chemists and biologists, they certainly want to know who might be coming, right? Next year. They're trying to line up their class as well. And ideally, they want to be able to begin to sort through the applicants, especially if they're really competing for you.
That's a great point, Tony. Thank you for making that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's usually the case that on the PhD side of things, an admissions committee is going to be comprised of faculty members, and it's as opposed to a lot of other master's level things, that it's going to be, professionals, but not, PhD academics, faculty. And it's a big difference between most master's programs and most doctorate programs. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Absolutely. As an example, when I was at Duke in grad school, one year a class that I was going to teach was canceled. So they put me in admissions. My job was to read the incoming applications and assign the faculty readers. And I was there, I'd been there long enough that I knew who the faculty were. And so those applications were going to be read by the 2 or 3 really specific faculty members with whom that student would be working. And usually the student, if they had done a good job, would have mentioned a couple of faculty members, or maybe they had contact with Professor such and such. And so that really, and that also makes the application the need to be very specific in that application. So I think you always want to err on the side probably of specificity, but when you get to that PhD application, you're often talking about the project that you're going to be working on. You haven't started it yet necessarily, but this is what you specifically want to study and why you want to study with Professor X, right, in this program. Whereas I think some other programs, it's going to be a little bit more general than that.
Fantastic. Well, and we've had 2 questions come in about gap years. So this I'd love to get your thoughts on. Questions about, would you recommend deferring grad school admission for a year and working, or doing something else during that year in order to build up your resume? Or does that not matter so much and it's okay to go straight in to grad school?
So the great question. So there is a question every grad student has to ask him or herself, and that is when is the right time for me to, pursue graduate school? And for some people, yeah, it's straight out of undergraduate. For others, it's call it a gap year, call it time in the professional working world, whatever you want to do. And there's a lot of moving parts as to when the best time is for everyone. And just because it's the right time for your best friend doesn't mean it's the best time for you. So be real careful about the herd mentality there. You need to make the decision of when it's best for you. That said, there are a lot of graduate programs that do have a pretty consistent track record as far as like when they do sort of like to see applicants. So for example, very common for medical school and law school to have individuals coming straight from undergraduate. Not everyone, but generally speaking, that's going to be, you'll see that quite a bit. Very different than an MBA program, where if you look at the top tier programs, most of them are going to, as far as their successful applicants, they're going to have on average somewhere between 4 and 6 years of post-undergraduate full-time professional work experience, when they matriculate into that MBA program. And you can deduce from that, if that's their average in the class, you can bet that admissions committees are going to be looking for that, and there's a reason for that. It all comes down to, if you're going to take a gap year or going to take some time away from the academic setting, no problem. Hey, that's fine. Expect that every admissions committee is going to want to know how you spent your time, and you whatever that might be. Ideally, it's somehow aligned with, okay, and then that's why now I'm ready, or now it's the right time for me to go to graduate school. It doesn't necessarily have to be everything perfectly. You don't have to do everything aligned with graduate school, but you want to demonstrate that you use that time wisely, and we're angling toward graduate school, at least to a degree, the entire time.
Yeah, if I can add something without getting too worked up, that the idea of a gap year, it really strikes me. I've been in the business a long time. The gap year used to refer to the year between high school and college, right? If you want to take that time. But now, because students have the expectation that they will go to graduate school, they now refer to this post-baccalaureate time as a gap year. And I agree entirely with what Kevin says, which is there might be many gap years, especially in something like MBA, law school. I mean, there are plenty of programs where that extra time might really help you a lot in terms of getting into a better school and understanding why you want to do it. So there's that discernment period. To give an example from my own life, so after I graduated college, I was pretty sure I wanted to go to grad school and get a PhD in history, but wasn't 100% sure, and I was still refining my ideas. So I worked construction in San Francisco for 2 years with some buddies. And at night, I worked on my languages that I needed to apply to grad school anyway, right? I had to add some language work, and that gave me the exact time. Plus, it also, in a sense, I hate to use the word rested, but mentally and emotionally, I was better prepared for graduate school than some of my colleagues in my graduate program at Duke, who simply went straight through. They were worn out and burned out, and they weren't always sure why they were doing it, I think. And just as reference, I think 22 of us started our PhDs, and I think only 9 of us completed our PhDs from that cohort. And that's probably pretty standard. It's going to be about 50% dropping out. And I think that discernment period can really help you. So there's the plug for the Jesuit discernment bit. If you can understand, well, it also can help you understand a little bit better subfields and specialties in a discipline, even if it's a pretty, direct path and you're thinking, law school, med school, but having a year or two might help you decide, what you want to specialize in.
So,
That's great. And I know we're right about time, but there is one last question I'd like to ask, because I think it's so appropriate for right now. Someone asked, if you're laid off due to COVID or industry changes this year, how do you feel that this will be viewed by admissions? And do you have any tips on explaining that in a resume interview?
sure. Oh yeah. So as speaking as both an former admissions director and someone who is a career coach, I'm coaching a lot of people right now on the career side of things, good, strong, outstanding professionals who are on the shelf right now, and it's through no fault of their own. And it's just simple as the environment that we're in right now. It's just the way it is. And I'm friendly with a lot of admissions officers who were once my colleagues, so I'm fairly plugged in on that side of things. And I can tell you directly from them to me that they understand as well. And it's sure some individuals still might lose a job or whatever like that, not to performance issues or whatever. But at the same time, for the most part, if you're part of something like that, especially due to the COVID-19 situation, they do understand that. And on resumes, by the way, it's become more and more common to put in the dates. If you have a situation like your current job and it's like you've got an end date of 2020, you almost put right underneath there. It's a thing now. You put COVID reduction on there, and people get it immediately. I don't know of many people who would truly hold that against someone in this environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to be pretty lousy to hold that against somebody in this environment.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it is what so.
Could I add one comment, which is not COVID related? It was interview related. One trend that I'm seeing a lot in the fellowships world and also in grad school world now is behavioral questions on interviews. So these are, tell us about a time when you had to overcome a difficult boss, or negative interaction with a coworker. And there's a whole sort of protocol, situation, task, action, and result. And there's plenty of stuff online about how to answer that. I'm seeing that in almost all fellowship interviews now. It caught me off guard in the beginning, but it's now so regular that I routinely now prepare our students for that and make them think about, okay, you want to say these things about yourself, and you're going to want to talk about your attributes and your skills. Make sure you have some stories prepared to be able to go into that situation, task, action, result, and to talk about your other strengths.
Yeah, Maura, you probably coach people all the time on that for job interviews, huh?
I was going to say, if any of you want to come to my workshop next Friday, you gave me a perfect lead-in, Tony. So thank you. Now, this was wonderful. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone who's still here with us listening. I always take tons of notes, and there was a lot of really great information that you shared, Kevin. And Tony, it's so invaluable to have your input and to hear what you're hearing from the Holy Cross community that you work with, that it's a real treat to have you both in this conversation. Everyone, please know you've got Kevin's information here on the screen. If you have any questions, by all means, you can email me in the alumni office. I'm at msweeney@holycross.edu. And there is a survey that will go out after this presentation. Please give me your feedback. It's how I bring great presenters like Kevin to the Holy Cross community. Please let me know what you'd like to see in the future and new ideas for speakers. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this has been recorded, and I'll share that recording with everyone once it's ready, and it will live up on the Holy Cross YouTube page. With that, thank you again, Kevin. Thank you, Tony. This has been really fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fantastic.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Take care.
Mm-hmm.